So let's talk about product cost for a manufactured product. So we basically have three types of costs that make up the product cost. We have direct materials, we have direct labor, and then we have overhead. An overhead can be called manufacturing overhead, it could be called factory overhead or fixed overhead or variable overhead. So we have different versions of the overhead. So direct material, direct labor, and overhead. So for direct material, that would be any main component of a product that we can trace the cost to that product. So for example, if you're making a guitar, then you have some of the direct materials included would be wood that you would make the guitar from. So that's an example of direct material. For direct labor, I call that touch labor. So anyone who actually touches the product during the manufacturing process would be considered direct labor. So an example there would be an assembly worker, maybe someone in the sanding department or the painting department would be considered direct labor. And overhead has different categories within it, so it can include indirect materials, and those are materials that cannot be easily traced or linked to a specific cost object, and also indirect labor, and so that's anyone who is part of the cost of the plant or the production facility, but doesn't actually touch the product. And so that could include the supervisor salaries, janitor salaries would just be some examples there. It also includes depreciation, rent, utilities, etc. So there are several different categories there. So indirect material could include maybe glue that might be used or wood that's kind of insignificant, and it would cost us more to determine the amount of cost than it would benefit us. So we really wouldn't determine that as being a direct material, it would just be indirect. So here's the formula for a total product cost, and that is direct material plus direct labor plus the overhead. So I have a little example here for us to look at. This is Jacobs Company, and they produce dining tables. Each table includes the following components. So we basically have wood, glue, nails. We might also have, some of the lacquer to put the shine on the wood. I didn't include that, but that might be also a component. And so the following information is given. So they've given us the cost of wood, glue and nails, plant supervisor salary, utilities expense, depreciation expense, the annual rent, production workers' wages, the selling commission. This should be selling commissions, and then administrative expenses. So let's take a look. What was the total product cost for the year? So remember, product cost includes direct materials, direct labor, and the overhead. So I like to go down through each one of the items here and then determine what category it would belong to, if any of these categories. So let's look at the first one, wood. Wood is a main component of a dining table, so that would fall under direct material. So we would include that cost. Glue and nails are not direct material. That would be indirect material, and we would find that in the overhead account, so that would be included. Plant supervisor salary, that's indirect material, and that's part of overhead. Utilities expense, depreciation expense, and the rent would all be considered the overhead components. Production workers' wages, those are the people who actually touch the product, that would be direct labor. The selling commission and the administrative expense would not be included in the product cost, so we will not include the last two items here. So really, it's everything but the last two. So our total product cost for the year is direct material. So let's look at how I came up with that, or calculated direct material. That includes the wood that would be used in production. Direct labor was the production workers' wages. And then the manufacturing overhead I had to calculate. And let's go back up. And that included the glue and nails, the plant supervisor salaries, utilities expense, depreciation, and annual rent. That was in the manufacturing overhead. And so once you add all of those costs together, the total cost was $403,200, $403,200. Now the next question is, what was the product cost per unit if 4,600 tables were manufactured? So all we have to do here is use this formula for unit product cost, and we take the total product cost and divide it by the number of units produced. So let's take our calculator here and take the total product cost of $403,200 and divide it by the number of tables we produced, 4,600. So we calculate a product cost, and we'll round to 2 decimal places because we're talking about dollars and cents here. So it looks like $87.65 per unit per table is our unit product cost. So again, this is just an overview of product cost and how to calculate the total and how to calculate per unit product cost.